Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is Hannibal Season 3, Episode 6, Dulce. Episode in a nutshell is a brief summary of what happened in the episode. So we start the episode with Mason sampling different dishes that Cordell has made to test out recipes he's going to eat made of Hannibal's body. So basically when they kill Hannibal, they'll cut him up into pieces, and these are sampling recipes that they're going to use to cook him. Then we see Cordell with Mason, Margot, and Alana watching the news, where news of Ronaldo's death is being publicized on the Italian news networks, which makes them worry that they may have missed Hannibal, but they start making plans for that eventuality. We then have Chio arriving in Florence, where she enters the apartment to find Bedelia, who is about to inject herself with medications. And they talk about how, they're caged birds, but unlike Bedelia, who wants to try to run away, Chio's flying straight for Hannibal, and what could possibly inspire such devotion, so on and so forth. But obviously Hannibal's not there, so Chio does eventually leave. And Bedelia then takes the medications that she was planning to take. After she does, there's a knock on the door, and this is when Will and Jack arrive, and Bedelia starts to pretend that she's confused, and she truly believes her name is Lydia Fell, and who is Bedelia? Couldn't possibly be her, blah, 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 which is then recognized by Jack to be her alibi, as she's been taking the same cocktail of medications that Hannibal had been giving Miriam Lass in order to trick her into believing Chilton was him. And so this is basically her setting up her alibi. We then have a brief scene where Mason talks to Margot about how he regrets taking away her ability to have children, and he knows that she wants a baby, and they could have a baby together, and it would be theirs, and he would be a good father. He could take parenting classes, and even though Margot doesn't have a uterus anymore, he has viable sperm, so it could still work out. We then have Will approaching Hannibal, who is in a museum looking at a painting while drawing, and they share some moments where they talk about, how entwined they are and conjoined, and could they survive a separation, and all those other things before they decide to leave together. However, as they're walking away, Will pulls out a knife, which Chio is able to see through her scope, and so she does end up shooting Will in the shoulder, which of course means that Hannibal now knows that Will was once again going to betray him after going all that way to find him, and their nice conversation in the museum, etc. We then get a brief aside into Elena and Margot revealing that they are in a physically intimate relationship with each other. And at the end of that scene, Margot tells Alana that before Mason is arrested, they need to get something from him, and Margot asks if she knows how to harvest sperm. Then we have Jack and Bedelia being questioned about Ronaldo's death. Jack then is able to leave while Bedelia stays behind. We then move on to Hannibal treating Will's wound before injecting him with a medication that basically has him hallucinating their faces in smoke as antlers on the same deer, like different antlers on the same deer, and like a dinner table, and it's a bit trippy of a dreamscape dinner. Before Will wakes up, and he is tied to a chair at the table where Hannibal is feeding him a thyme and parsley infusion so that it can have time to circulate until Jack arrives at dinner and he finds Will and comes over to him to check on him, and Will immediately warns him that Hannibal is under the table, but Jack is attacked before he can really acknowledge the statement. And this is when Jack wakes up on the other side of the table from Will with an IV bag in him, which basically leaves him paralyzed, unable to do anything other than like potentially speak and chew and such, but like very low motor function. And Hannibal decides that he's going to eat Will's brain. So basically, Will is still strapped down. Hannibal gets out the saw and he starts to saw into Will's forehead. But then we see that the scene then changes and shifts, and it ends up with Will hanging upside down and being welcomed by Mason to the Muskrat Farm back in the US. And that is where we leave this episode. So now that we've summarized the episode, we'll now rank the episode, and as always, we'll be ranking on the two lists, our mostly objective ranking list using set values, followed by the personal ranking list, which is based on my opinion. So starting with our mostly objective rank values, we first have our multi-season supporting character development, which is that Bedelia has been taking medications for alibi purposes and has decided to pretend that she's been, through the use of these medications, brainwashed into believing herself to truly be Lydia Fell. There is a point where she's being interrogated by the detective where he basically says he knows she's faking, but since he's not working for the police at that time, he wants her information and she does end up giving it to him, showing that it is a lie, but she has been planning this alibi for some time, as she does have a stock of the medications. We then also have an additional, and that was 3 points, so additional 3 points for impactful / memorable, moment line, etc. And that, of course, is Hannibal attempting to eat Will's brain. Very memorable moment, one that sticks with you throughout time outside of the series. Then, worth 4 points, we had our multi-season main character development, which is, of course, Will getting shot by Chio, then drugged by Hannibal, then brought to dinner by Hannibal, where Hannibal attempts to have his brain for dinner. Quite a bit of development for Will in this case. And then finally, we have yet 4 more points, which is our main relationship development, which is where we discover that Morgo and Alana are in a physically intimate relationship with each other. And that then leaves only the negative points. And our negative points are, of course, for negative messaging or behavior. And you might think that the negative messaging or behavior would be, drug use, the drugging of Jack, trying to eat Will's brain. And those are all negative things. But the one that I decided to take the points for was that a detective from the police interrogates Bedelia and basically point blank says to her that he's not really working for the police, he's actually been bribed by Mason and he's getting information for money. And that is obviously extremely negative messaging or behavior because the police are supposed to be the ones who, okay, what's the best way to say it? Keep order. They're supposed to be the ones who follow the law, not break the law, and obviously corrupt police officers are never a good thing given the role that they play in society, and therefore corrupt police officer, very negative messaging / behavior, and therefore definitely worth the -2 points, which does bring us to a 12 out of 10, 10 being the maximum score, making this a mostly objective rank of 10. Which brings us to the ranking list for the mostly objective ranking, and this episode is in first place, Dulce And then Primavera, Aperitif, Antipasto, Contorno, and Secondo. Personal ranking for this episode. I greatly enjoyed pretty much all of it except one part of it. So I scored it very highly. I did find that a large section of this episode was finally Will and Hannibal reuniting. And as I've said from like episode one, I really think that for me at least personally, the series is really about Will and Hannibal and how they interact with each other. And so finally getting to see that interaction again was excellent, was great. Frankly speaking, I've mentioned this in past videos too. I read a lot of fan fiction. I'm a fan of fan fiction, and I felt like most of this episode, especially where Will and Hannibal were interacting, is pretty much fodder for fan fiction writers, and I have read a great many that take advantage of the scenes in this episode, and that made me happy to see because it was finally getting back to what I feel like the root of the series is. I'll admit I don't really get why Jack had to be included, honestly. I feel like he's like the third wheel that just like never gets taken off. I honestly don't really understand why he had to be included because it would have been really awesome to just be like Hannibal and Will. But anyways, Jack does arrive at a certain point. But we did get to see Hannibal and Will's interactions, which was great for me. I enjoyed it greatly. I also like Mason's also one of my favorite characters, just because I find him amusing and interesting as a character. If he was a real person, absolutely despicable, would never want to know him, but as a fictional character, very good. And so him getting what he wants, like the cliffhanger of Welcome to Muskrat Farm, and the beginning of the episode where he's like testing out various recipes that he wants to use Hannibal's body parts in when he catches him. Great scenes. Bedelia, I also like Bedelia as a character. I just like the way that she speaks. And so, when she was being interrogated, I also found that very entertaining, that had entertainment value for me. So we're getting to the one part that I didn't necessarily enjoy, and that really was the way that they did the reveal of Alana and Margot's relationship. They did like this psychedelic thing, like you were looking through one of those like whatever kind of, the tubes that have like the reflective glass or whatever on the side, and then when you look into it, it just like is a fracturing of a bunch of different colors. Kaleidoscope, I think it is called. They kind of did a thing like that, and I just personally wasn't a fan of it. Oh, but I did find it amusing how Mason wants a baby now all of a sudden, and he wants to raise it with Margot and kept calling it their baby. They could have their baby, they could raise it together, which I felt was a little bit disturbing, but also hilarious, especially given how much she hates him. Anyways, all that to say, I really liked the episode, majority of it. Small part that I didn't like, and that is why it is a 9 out of 10. And that does put Dulce in first place, followed by Contorno, Aperitivo, or Aperitif, and then Primavera, Secondo, and then Antipasto in sixth place. Which now leads us to the series ranking so far. And we have on our mostly objective ranking season 2 in first place with 86.92%, season 1 in second with 83.85%, and season 3 so far with a score of 48 out of 130. On the personal side, we had season 2 in first with 88.46%, season 1 in second with 66.92%, and season 3 so far has a total score of 35 out of 130. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Hannibal season 3, episode 6. Dulce, like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.